Hey everybody, welcome back to Great Northwest Weaponry. This is Thomas, and today, taking a look at another piece I picked up from my friends at the Warfront. Got this one a while back. The Swiss K31, or Karabiner model 1931. This is another one of our Swiss straight pull bolt action rifles. Really cool one. 6 shots of GP11. This is the direct predecessor to the K11 that we took a look at a while back. We actually did a short on the K31, a first shots short a couple months ago, and that video has blown up, at least, you know, compared to others on my channel. It's at, I think, over 11,000 views now, which is, for me, huge. Most of my videos never see the tens of thousands of views range, so figured seems like you guys like this thing, so it's high time that we do a full-length demo. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and take this thing into the gun room and talk a little bit about the history of the K31.
This video is going to have probably the most straightforward history segment that we've ever done on the channel to this point. Reason for that is we have already done a very lengthy dive into the history of the Swiss K11, the predecessor to the K31, and we covered Schmidt-Rubin rifle history up to that point quite thoroughly in that video. And that pretty much is the whole backstory behind what led to the K31 that you see before me here right now. So if you want to know the designs that came before the K31 and their history, I'm going to put a link to the K11 video in this video's description. But the K31 was meant to be an across-the-board replacement for the model 1911 design. We actually have that K11 right here. So for reference, this is your K11. K31 is before me there. The 31 again meant to replace both the K11 and the G11 across the board. It was meant to be a standardized replacement that would be usable for all troops. So cavalry, army, navy, anybody who was going to be given a rifle was going to be given this. The carbine variation of the model 1911 was favored because of its length, but bashed for its accuracy, or lack thereof. And I have actually experienced that to a degree myself. So the barrel on the K31 was made substantially heavier than the barrel on the K11. You can actually somewhat noticeably see a thickness difference between the two, but we'll look at some of that a little closer when we go to the tabletop here in a minute. Other differences largely were bolt related, of which again we'll look at when we go to the tabletop. But some of the more obvious stuff that just to look at is location of a couple of things. So the rear sight was moved back. As you see here, it was moved all the way to the edge of the receiver. This would make production of handguards substantially easier than having to do this weird cutout seen on the K11. Also, the whole bolt system again was altered, so your operating mechanism is right next to your trigger instead of way forward from the trigger. All the operating mechanism on the K11, your extraction is happening up here, of which is, you know, a number of inches away from the trigger instead of right above it. Also, with the moving of the extraction, obviously the magazine is moved farther back to accommodate that, and the magazine itself was altered. Again, we'll look closer at the bolt here in a minute, but a lot of these changes were made to both simplify and cheapen production, but not cheapen it quality-wise, just straight-up cost-saving measures, because some of this is unnecessary, like with the cutout situation seen on the K11. Also, moving the sight farther back gives you a wider range from your rear sight to front sight, making your point of aim a little more accurate. As you see in a lot of World War II rifles, the sight has actually been moved all the way back to the end of the receiver, such as the Springfield 1903 and such. But K11, again, completely phased out by the K31, K11 and G11. We'll, again, be bringing that back out when we go to the tabletop here in just a few. But once the K31 was developed in 1931, in May, the first batch of 200 were sent to the military for testing, and they liked it. It was a sufficient upgrade, using the same ammo, I might add, so GP11 or Gewehr's Patron 11, or 1911, also known as 7.5 Swiss, and I'm sure we'll probably mention that again when we go to the loading segment at the end of the video. But so May 1931, trials were a success. By 1933, the K31 was in full production. It gets the name K31 from that 1931 trial, by the way. Production would not cease until 1958, and from 1933 to 1958, this was the official standard rifle of the Swiss Armed Services across the board. Again, this was meant to be used by literally everybody. Starting in 1958, these were slowly phased out by the Sturmgewehr 57. They wouldn't be fully phased out until as far as into the 1970s. And there's not really an exact date. It doesn't seem to be something that is known precisely, but they were replaced in 1958. It just took a while for that replacement to go into full effect. Stocks were, until 1946, made of walnut. After that, they were made of beechwood. This is, I believe it's a 1952 example, but it's a walnut stock, and that there could be a few reasons. Again, these had a long service life, so sometimes parts get mixed and matched, but this example is matched from end to end. However, there were some reserves of walnut stocks, so a number of later rifles well into the 50s would still have walnut stocks if one was, you know, pulled out and, oh, hey, we haven't used this walnut stock, go and throw it on that next rifle. Here's a batch of, 100 or so walnut stocks that weren't previously used. So rifles to either side of this particular serial number block would have probably been beechwood, of which is a much softer wood and doesn't look nearly as pretty as walnut. So I'm very glad this is a walnut example, but yeah, I'm kind of rambling about stocks. It's just a thing that happens, I guess. Again, calling this a Schmidt-Rubin, I don't actually know if I've mentioned this yet, but calling this rifle a Schmidt-Rubin would be utterly inaccurate. These were designed by Waffenfabrik Bern, but both Rudolf Schmidt and Edward Rubin were dead. I think Rudolf Schmidt, who designed the rifle, the original rifle design, the model 1889 and then the 96, he died in 1898, and Edward Rubin, who designed 7.5 Swiss, the cartridge, died in 1920. So neither of them were around to see this design. It had nothing to do with them. It was based on their designs, but it is very much meant as a replacement and an upgrade. And again, we'll have to test these two guns head to head, but I do believe the K31 is a more sound rifle than the K11 is. I'd love to get my hands on a G11 and see if there's a substantial difference, in my hands at least, of the accuracy between a G11 and a K11. But the K31, with what little I've shot both of these, I definitely have had more success with the K31. It's a very accurate rifle. I just need to learn it a little more. But that about covers history, so let's go ahead and transition to a tabletop view, take a closer look at some of these differences and some other cool features of this gun. Here I am going to, as I often do, attempt to keep this somewhat brief. We've got both rifles on screen here, so this is your K31 and this is your K11. So just bear that in mind. Again, most of the differences are fairly minute. You can, again, looking at them from the top, quickly identify a lot of small alterations. You've got a nice big Swiss cross on your top of your K31 here, but again, you can see the bolt position pretty dramatically altered. as well as the shape of the receiver, the location of the rear sight, the rear sight of which on both examples goes up to 1,500 meters. Trigger, more or less the same between the two. You got a double stage trigger on these, which is really nice for guns of their era. Double stage triggers were pretty uncommon. You've actually got, and I'm just going to show this on the K31, but both of these have a nice little Swiss shield cartouche on the stock. And what I mentioned about the stock material, by the way, you can see the difference. This right here is on the K11 beech and then walnut. Also, the finger grooves were altered. So on the K31, if you're holding the rifle, your fingers right there, the thumb groove is actually moved farther forward. So the thumb groove lines up right with your rear sight, and then the finger grooves are behind the rear sight. K11 is a flat, finger grooves, rear sight. Just bear in mind your location there. And it's the same on both sides. I had mentioned that the magazine itself was actually altered, so we can take a look at that real quick. Extracting the magazine is very easy. There's just this button here. You push it in, pull it out. So there's your K31 mag, K11 mag. Leave those out for the moment. Bolt extraction is the same on both, so you just simply pull back, pull down on this lever seen right there, and then the bolt extracts. So here's your K31 bolt, and we're going to take a close look at the, or closer look anyway, at the differences between the two. K31 bolt is definitely smoother operating than the K11 bolt. Both are smooth, all things considered, but yeah, look at that. An enormous amount of alteration on the bolt. And it definitely helps having this shorter bolt on the K31 with what I mentioned with the ease of extraction and also the ease of cocking this bolt, but also your guiding piece, because of these being a straight pull system, they're going to be a little more complicated. But on the K31, it was simplified to just a flat bar that is locked in place by a notch, instead of this weirdly designed tubular thing here with your whole locking system being on the bottom. The K11 was a good design, but the K31 is definitely a better design. Now, I'm not going to bother with the K11 from here, but K31 and K11, you can just push the bolt straight back in, and same with the magazine, it can just simply be pushed in. So, easy peasy. I'm actually going to go ahead and just... There we go. Now I'm going to kind of set the K11 off the side here, because there's one more thing that I want to take a look at before we go back out to the range with the K31. There's an interesting thing. A lot of these have a card hidden in underneath the butt plate. So what we're going to do here is remove the butt plate with a screwdriver. Should just take me a moment. And this is something that collectors often are searching for when acquiring a K31, is one that has this feature. Most of them do have it, but very rarely does it actually match the gun, because, well, I'll just show you here. So, peel that off, and see a piece of paper hiding under there. There is your serial number for the gun, and it does not match on mine, and very few of them do. And then on the reverse side, I utterly failed to get this in camera on that first attempt, so there you go. Get a nice close look. So yeah, that is just an interesting little souvenir that you find on some of these. Putting that buttstock plate back on is going to be, you know, the same exact as taking it off. You're just going to put your 2 screws in, make sure you got this lined up. I'm not going to bother doing that on camera because I need to have a, you know, a good angle that I'm looking at it from to make sure I don't mangle this, because just having this is cool, but I, again, very simply don't want to harm it. So anyway, that about wraps up our tabletop segment. So let's go back out to the range and shoot the thing some more.
Loading this gun is pretty straightforward. You're just going to pull your bolt straight back. Then you've got these 6-round cardboard chargers, seats in the slot there, and then you just push all the way down. And that last round has a tendency, at least in this example, to try and jump out of place. I'm just going to toss that on the ground. So you kind of have to work it back down into place, but not a big deal. Definitely something that some practice with this rifle would probably correct, but it is an issue that I've noticed. And real quick, before we fire, so this is your safety right here, is this ring. You just pull it straight back, rotate, and when it is vertical, as seen here, that is fire, and when horizontal, that is safe. So, on fire, the grip on this thing feels really nice. It's actually got staggered finger grooves. My glasses are fogging up a bit, so my accuracy here may not be great. I'm actually gonna wipe these off real quick. That's better. Okay, here we go. 6 shots. About 50% accuracy, not terrible. You can, by the way, drop the firing pin safely by putting your thumb in the loop and pulling the trigger while guiding it down. These glasses are just fogging up. Terrible. But yeah, it's a really cool rifle. With some practice, I do think that I could get pretty good with this one. If only GP11 was a little easier to get your hands on. You can find, I think Privy Partisan makes 7.5 Swiss, which does work in these pretty well, and it's not terribly inaccurate in them, but original GP11 is definitely the way to go if you can get your hands on it. It's, you know, at least in this example, quite accurate. We will definitely be putting this gun head-to-head with others like it, namely other straight pull bolt action rifles, and really anything else World War II era, especially anything that was considered at the time to be a good gun, because the K31, a lot of people argue that it's one of the better designs of World War II. So I'd like to see this against the Kar98 and the Enfield No. 4 Mark I, of which are, you know, going to be the other two that people often are going to argue about being the best of their time. So definitely putting this head-to-head with the K11, but that will have to come another day when I can get some more either GP11 or 7.5 Swiss, and maybe get a few more shots downrange with both rifles. Actually learn the sights on them a little better. This one does seem pretty accurate to point of aim. The K11, I've actually had some real trouble being very accurate with. But anyway, there you have it. Another demo in the bag. Hope you all enjoyed the video. It's been Thomas with Great Northwest Weaponry, and I'll see you all next time.